Hey, just finishing this claim to get Dave back on the road.
Nice. I wonder what Dave's doing.
You do your thing. We've got you covered.
Hey, is the power off on this?
I don't know. Just take it off.
Safety violation, unsafe work conditions.
In the construction trades unions, safety is our highest priority, and we train you to recognize and speak out on unsafe working conditions so that everyone arrives and goes home safely. Learn about careers in construction at georgiaconstructioncareers.com.
All right, good afternoon and welcome to the 308th episode of the Alfa Insurance Georgia Prep Sports Drive for the GHSA State Title. Today we're going to be joined by Manchester head coach Stephen Holmes. It is the first time I've had them on the show, so I'm really excited about that. He'll come on at 12:40. I'm also going to go in depth with the Class 4A matchup between Stockbridge and Perry. It's very exciting, and it goes along with another theme, which is bringing your county or your district its first ever state title, and that is something that Stockbridge has a chance to do. I actually mentioned this earlier in the season that they had a chance to be the first ever school out of Henry County to make the state finals, and I had forgotten about it until I saw the article yesterday where Shaquille O'Neal went to visit the Tigers down in Stockbridge and Henry County to offer them some words of encouragement. So I thought that was awesome. Shout out to Shaq. And this is a very special Stockbridge team and opportunity for that program, for that community, and for Henry County. And so it goes along with Southwest Atlanta. And I'm going to be talking about them a lot next week and then during the state championships, because it is the 50th anniversary of their state championship in 1973. They beat Americus, had an undefeated season, and just so many outstanding players in that game, including Anthony Terry and then Anthony Flanagan, who went on to become the first African-American starting quarterback at the University of Georgia. Was also an outstanding basketball player. And I'll have that story up. I'm going to work on it later today. It will be finished and ready to roll by Monday. And then that team is going to be honored in between the 5A and 7A state championship game on Wednesday. It's going to be very exciting. And so that team, it really means a lot because Atlanta Public Schools, more so than any other district, I feel like, has just had a lot of movement and change, and schools that open and close, and they're dealing with the integration, and Atlanta's growing in certain neighborhoods, and it's just there's a lot of turnover and change. And so really that state championship win, it really meant a lot. Imagine if they didn't have a state championship. And so I'm going to talk to Jasper Jewell later, their longtime athletic director that has done such a phenomenal job, and he played his high school football at Therrell, and he has been a football coach, and he's going to bring a different perspective to it because I've already talked to a lot of the players about some of the big victories they had during that season, about the final game where they beat Americus. That team was absolutely loaded with so many outstanding players that have gone into our Hall of Fame. But I want to talk to Jasper just to get really a sense of how much that meant to have a team from the Atlanta Public Schools win that state title, the legacy of it, and how proud they are, and just what to expect when that team's represented, because they have come close in years since. South Atlanta had a really strong run last year. They ended up losing a heartbreaker in, I think, the quarterfinals. You had Mays making the state title a few years back, so they've come really close. But I just think it's so important that that team was able to accomplish that ultimate goal. State titles mean so much, and talking to these players 50 years later, they're still talking about it, even though a lot of them went on to have great careers. So that's what's at stake for Stockbridge on Tuesday when they play in the 4A state title game. It's going to be a historic matchup. Their opponent, Perry, actually set the all-time state record for most seasons played before ever reaching a finals at 70 games. Milton previously held the record. It took them 69 seasons to make this state finals for the first time in 2018. They were successful. They won that one. They ended up making the state championship again in 2021, and that is when they lost to Collins Hill. Walton, they're going to be in it for the second time, squaring up against Milton. They are 0-1 in 2011. But so Perry, it took them 70 seasons. Stockbridge, it took them 60. So that's a big deal with that matchup. It's the only matchup guaranteed to crown a first ever state champ for both Perry and Stockbridge, and it's going to be a heck of a matchup. So let's get into it with Stockbridge. I have their season laid out right here, all 14 games, and then the key stats from the game. The ones I focus on, the running game, how many yards did Jaden Duke Scott contribute? He's pacing the state this year in rushing. He's been outstanding start to finish. So we're going to look at his numbers, how much help he got from the other running backs. We're going to look at Kobe Tompkins, their quarterback, his numbers. He's also shown that he has the ability to pick up yards on the ground running. And then we're going to look at the defense and their incredible numbers regarding tackles for loss and sacks. And then this will give us a really good idea of what Perry's going up against with this outstanding team. So in their season opener against Douglas County, they lost that one 35-28. Jaden Duke Scott had 19 carries for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Jordan Mack, who was opening the season in that tandem role with Jaden Duke, he had 11 carries, a game high 121 yards, and a touchdown. In the game since, he's not taken more than 3 carries. He's been battling injuries. He did have 1 carry. This is Jordan Mack. He had 1 carry for 3 yards in their win over Benedictine. So his health is going to be an interesting thing to look for to see if he's going to play a bigger role. And then also stepping up, once Jordan Mack went out, he had a couple big games along the way that we'll talk about, but Mike Sims has really stepped up. He stepped up in the Hampton game, 54 yards rushing, stepped up in the Woodland game, 2 touchdowns, 83 yards on the ground. And so he's able to take 8 to 10 carries and give Jaden Duke Scott some rest. So in that opener, they ended up rushing for 241 yards, and then Kobe Tompkins passed for 163. He was 16 of 26. His numbers are a little shy of 60% completion percentage, but he has had very efficient games, and they are willing to be aggressive because they have such an explosive backfield. So he had 1 touchdown, 1 interception in that game, and then defensively, 14 tackles for loss and 15 sacks week 1 against Douglas County. So they played their next tough opponent after that with Colquitt County. Kobe Tompkins had a really solid game considering they're going up against a 4A school against a 7A state semifinalist. He had state quarterfinalist. He had 16 of 25 passing for 113 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Jaden Duke Scott, 20 carries, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He did not get as much help from his teammates in that game. Jordan Mack, just 3 carries for 21 yards. Still, Duke had 144 yards. They rushed for 261 as a team. They had 8 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. Then they get into their 4A. Sorry, Doherty's not a 4A, but they get into their non-region schedule and they start playing more 4A programs, 3A programs. They beat Doherty 54-0, huge victory. In that game, they rushed for 326 yards, passed for 178. Obviously a running clock game, 1 sack, 6 tackles for loss. They play Luella next. That is a 4A team, cross-region. Kobe Tompkins, 7 of 11 passing, 163 for 2 touchdowns. And then this is what I'm talking about, his ability to run. He had 5 carries, 84 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. I think he's around 700 yards rushing this season and about 14 touchdowns. So he is a very capable runner. And when they're able to get Jaden Duke Scott going and he can keep it on a read option play, he can definitely get outside and make you pay. So he's a huge part in this game, not just with his arm, but also his legs. In that game against Luella, 16 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Watch out. They played Hampton after that, 41-20 victory. Kobe Tompkins, 233 yards through the air, no interceptions, 2 touchdowns. And then this is the first time Mike Sims has really gotten involved. Jaden Duke took just 9 carries but had 226 yards off 9 carries. Insane numbers. That's about 25 yards per carry. He had 3 touchdowns, and then Mike Sims, 7 carries, 54 yards. They had 11 tackles for loss and 2 sacks in that game. Played Mount Zion after that, 69-0 win. Easy work. They had 20 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. They beat Lovett 48-0, 4 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 376 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns by Jaden Duke Scott. They also played their freshman quarterback in that game. He was 3 of 3. So, I mean, you're playing a freshman quarterback against a playoff team like Lovett. You're shutting them out, and everyone is rolling. And Jordan Mack did return to play a role in that game. He had 9 carries, 75, and a touchdown. They beat Woodland 56-0 after that. Big game by the defense, 7 sacks in that game. They played Pace Academy, big region game, and their second to last game of the regular season. Won that one 31-7. They had 321 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns by Duke, 8 carries, 38 yards by Mike Sims, 20 tackles for loss, a season high, and then 7 sacks. Just insane production. They closed out the year against McDonough. They won that one 63-21. 3 touchdowns off just 5 carries by Jaden Duke Scott. 5 carries, 152 yards. So that's over 30 yards per carry in that game. Jordan Mack returned. He had 12 carries, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Mike Sims, 6 carries for 110 yards. This is against McDonough. Season high 460 rushing yards. They had 13 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. In the playoffs, they opened up against North Hall, won that one 48-0, 323 rushing yards, 167 passing, 3 touchdowns through the air by Kobe Tompkins, 1 rushing touchdown by Kobe Tompkins, and then 11 tackles for loss and a sack. Their toughest game of the season outside of those first 2 came in the second round against Westminster. They had to rally back. They won 28-24. Jaden Duke Scott had 21 carries, 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then Kobe Tompkins stepped up big, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, and then 72 yards on the ground. They had 11 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. They played Spalding after that, and Spalding had a great season. They were the region champ. And I think it was, I forgot their quarterback's name off the top of my head, but he was an outstanding player, a dual threat guy, and they absolutely swarmed him. 17 tackles for loss, a season high 11 sacks, and Jaden Duke Scott had 3 touchdowns, and then Kobe was 7 of 18 passing, 136 and a touchdown. Then in the latest one against Benedictine, the 2-time defending champs, Kobe Tompkins had a phenomenal game. He was 8 of 15 passing for 105 yards, and then ran the ball 8 times, 56 yards, and a season-high 3 rushing touchdowns. Meanwhile, Jaden Duke Scott, 27 carries. I think that was a season-high for 310 yards and 3 touchdowns. They rushed for 369, passed for 105, and produced 13 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. That is getting it done every single week. So, I mean, this Stockbridge team is the real deal. Perry's going to have their hands full, and we'll break down what Perry has next week. But in total, Cam Reese on the defensive side of the ball, he's leading in terms of those disruptive plays. He has 19 of their 63 sacks this season. That's got to be a school record. It's got to be leading the entire state this season. And he has 41 of their 177 tackles for loss. The only stat that Stockbridge doesn't have a lot of is interceptions. I think they only have like 4 or 5 on the season. But I think that's because they have 63 sacks. The quarterback's not even getting the ball off. And it's hard to get an interception when you sack the quarterback. So I couldn't be more impressed with this defense. They're disruptive. They can make game-changing plays on any drive. And then the offensive production. Kobe Tompkins this season, he's 640 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, and then he's closing in on 1,800 passing yards with 18 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, 2 of which came in the first 2 games of the season. And then Jaden Duke Scott, he has 2,357 yards this season with 38 touchdowns. He's closing in on a 40-touchdown season, so big time. And they have their stats with pancake blocks. I mean, their offensive line just getting after it, dominating. This team is fast, they're big, and they've got some really exciting guys on both sides of the ball, including their defense with Cam Reese, a tackling machine, and someone that's just been impossible to block this season, whether it's the Colquitt game, Douglas County, or the latest one against Benedictine. So that's what we got for Stockbridge. Just thought that was amazing, just looking at it game by game, routinely rushing for 350 yards as a team, always having the balance with the passing game, and then the defense, the big-time sacks, an 11-sack game against Lovett. I mean, it's just crazy. I've never seen any stats like that, and I can't wait to watch them in person next week. But let's go ahead. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back on the other side.
What you doing?
Hey, just finishing this claim to get Dave back on the road.
Nice. I wonder what Dave's doing.
You do your thing. We've got you covered.
Hey, does it matter if this leaks?
It don't matter to me, can't see it from my house.
Illegal use of hands and proper training.
GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com has 14 different highly skilled trades with tuition-free training in our certified apprenticeship programs to train you the right way. Find your career at GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com.
All right, welcome back. So let's look at a couple more of these matchups before we talk to Manchester in the final segment. All right, let's look at 2A real quick. This is one that I think it's going to be a contrast of styles between Pierce County and Rockmart, because with Pierce County, you have their quarterback that that is Caden McGatha, where he has been the MVP of these playoffs. He touched the ball, I think it was 53 of their 56 snaps last round, meaning he either carried it himself or passed. Only 3 plays where someone else carried the football. It's crazy how much he's been involved, and I think both of these teams are the hottest in the playoffs. They've really turned it on. They've had big wins. When you look at last round, the way that Pierce County beat Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald's not a team that ever gets blown out. And then you had Rockmart beating Cook, who was the #1 ranked team for pretty much the whole season. So it's going to be the first ever meeting between the two teams. They're both #1 seeds. Both teams are playing in the championship game for the second time in the past 6 seasons. Pierce County made it to the 2020 and defeated Oconee County 13-7 in overtime for the Class 3A title, their only previous trip to the finals. Rockmart made it in 2018 but lost to Heard County. The Yellowjackets also played in the finals in 46, 50, 54, and 57. So they're looking for the first state title since 1950, which would be the longest drought out of any team appearing in the finals that has previously won a state title. Offensively, as we said, everything flows through quarterback Caden McGatha for Pierce County. He's run for 1,900 yards and passed for 1,900 yards, putting him in reach of 2,000 for both categories. It's believed that Troops Teo Todd is the only other player to accomplish that feat in state history when he did it last year. So another historic opportunity, which I think is definitely in his reach. He can join Teo Todd as the only player to have 2,000 passing, 2,000 rushing. It's going to be phenomenal to watch that. Gatha ran or passed on 53 of Pierce's 55 plays in their 35-7 win over Fitzgerald. For Rockmart, Region Player of the Year Brent Washington has rushed for 885 yards and 18 touchdowns on 116 carries this season, and he leads a group of 6 players with at least 20 carries, 100 yards, and a touchdown for the season. So Rockmart spreads it out, where Pierce County is going to go all through McGatha. So what a great matchup. And then it is predicted by Maxwell, a very close game, 21 by Pierce County, 20 to Rockmart. So that is certainly going to be interesting. And then in Class A Division II, which is the matchup we'll talk to in a second with Manchester, I didn't realize this, but Bowdon, last year they had the second highest offensive production in their school's history, which they've been playing football a long time. So they had an outstanding offense last year, but this year it's been even more explosive, and they have already set the record for most points in a season, highest scoring average per game, and they did it when replacing a quarterback who scored something like, I think it was probably 40% of their touchdowns last season. So they've replaced that and taken it to the next level. They've been on a school record pace this season. All right, I'm going to go to, I think I saw this yesterday. It was a conversation with Jeremy Hecklinski by Todd Holcomb. One sec, guys. Here we go. 4 questions with Walton quarterback Jeremy Hecklinski. And I find this interesting because it's coming off a game where he had his first rough quarter of the season. He had to bounce back, compose himself after throwing back-to-back picks, and it also comes at the heel of him avenging the Carrollton loss, obviously getting Walton to the state finals for the second time in school history, and also getting snubbed on a lot of these all-state postseason lists, where you have, I think, the Atlanta Touchdown Club They gave it to like 3 or 4 quarterbacks and left him off. So let's see what he had to say to Todd Holcomb. So first question, Walton had a good team last season. You guys beat number 1 Buford in the playoffs and made the quarterfinals. But what is different about this team that has won 2 more rounds, won 3 more games, and scored 200 more points? Jeremy says, I would say the main difference is the maturity and health of the team. Last year we're very heavy-set junior team, which was good, but we weren't as developed and mature as we are now. The 2024 class has been through a lot these last couple years. We lost in the semis our sophomore year and a bad loss in the quarters last year. It has only helped us grow as a class and program. Also, during those previous seasons, we were hit with a variety of injuries that kept key players out of games when we needed them. Having everyone healthy and ready to play has been the biggest change from last season. And then Todd notes Walton has scored 695 points. The state record for the highest classification is 712. So they're 17 points off, and that was set last season by Mill Creek. Second question, what do you feel you do well, and what are areas that you're working to improve? He says, I feel I have a good balance of a pocket passer and escapability. My offensive line gives me a lot of time where I can sit in the pocket and deliver good throws, but every now and again we can't account for a free rusher, and I'll have to get out of the pocket and find a receiver down the field. My receivers do a good job of working to me when I'm out of the pocket to make it easier on me to complete the passes. I think the main thing I can work on is sharpening my craft to another level at all phases of my game, whether it be mentally or physically. I can always be better. Hiklinski was also asked if he felt overlooked at times with so many other top-flight quarterbacks in the state, many that don't have his numbers or victories. He said, I do not want the recognition for stats or being the best quarterback in the state. None of those things matter to me. All I'm trying to accomplish is to get my coaches, teammates, and this school a state championship ring. Let's go. All right, who are athletes that you look up to or admire and why? He says Aaron Rodgers, mainly the way he throws unconventionally. I also look up to a fellow teammate of mine, Ashton Woods, for his work ethic and dedication to being the best player, teammate, and person that he can be. He makes me want to do that every day. Woods is going to UNC, and he's going to be healthy after, I think, going into that last matchup a little banged up. He's been through a lot this season physically. Just didn't feel right. Still tried to give it a go. He was taking some big contact hits against that West Coast wing T offense, but he's going to be ready to go, and they're going to need him. All right, is there an interesting story about that recruitment? What led you to Wake Forest? And I believe he had a lot of these Walton players has had in-house visits this last week. I know Wake Forest was visiting with Jeremy, and then Mac Brown, UNC's coach, was over at the Woods house to meet with Ashton this week. Wake Forest was my first ever college camp. I really thought I killed the camp and was expecting an offer. When I didn't receive one, I kind of thought to myself, well, maybe I'm not what they were looking for. I decided I wasn't going to go back for another camp, but my recruiting director at my school, Monty Bumper, told me I should go. I ended up going back and having a really great camp. After that, they started to heavily recruit me. The main thing for me committing to Wake was the way I fit in their offense. They do a lot of RPO and do a lot of good things with the slow mesh system, which we do a lot at Walton. That is Tyler Jones, the offensive coordinator. I said Chris last week, so my apologies, which we do a lot at Walton. I also saw the way they had developed Sam Hartman, and I think me and Sam have a lot of the same characteristics. So I thought that was great. That 4-question series is a great resource. Todd does a good job at being timely with it. If a team gets a big historic win, Todd usually has them for that series. And I think the time was right to talk to Jeremy. He's going into this big game. He's had a phenomenal career. It's going to be his last varsity outing, and he has had his eyes set on this goal since day one, bringing Walton that state championship. I think the crowd's going to be incredible for that game. Milton's going to bring a lot, but I think what makes it different is, and actually IJ said it last week, I agree with him. If Walton doesn't win a state title this year, I think they're going to have good teams in the future, but it really feels like this is it. Like, this is now or never. You guys have been the best team in Cobb. You picked up big playoff wins, but, I mean, a season in the highest classification, trying to go perfect, everything has to go your way. And for the most part, it has this season, and they have that 1-0 mentality, but it feels like this really needs to be the season. And then for Milton, I was telling Najee, I think next season they're going to be my number one team in their classification for sure. They've got so much talent returning, guys that we haven't even really seen step up and play in the spotlight. They're going to have Luke Nickelback, a lot of their receivers, tons of playmakers on the offensive and defensive line. So am I sleeping on Milton? Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is I think they're going to be really solid next year, where Walton's going to lose a lot of these pieces. So I think it's now or never for Walton, where for Milton, they have a chance to continue to be great, but I think it's going to be such a phenomenal matchup, and we'll see what happens. I'm actually excited because this is a tough week. Obviously, for Georgia fans, they're pissed off because their season kind of came to an end last weekend after the loss in the SEC. So we don't have as much football, but we get to come back on Monday after a weekend where we're going to miss some football, miss the college games, and we're going to have 3 outstanding days, starting with the Class A, Division I, Division II, the flag football, and 2 more days of that. In terms of the flag football, quick, because it has been really exciting. The championships were great last year, and you have a lot of teams that have really invested into this sport. The girls that are excelling at soccer, lacrosse, they're getting involved in it, and they're having a lot of fun, and they're really enjoying it. And so Southeast Bullock, they advanced to the Class A through 4A championship. They're the only program that has a chance to win its 3rd straight. This is the 4th year of its existence, and the 2nd year where there's 3 different trophies handed out. So Southeast Bullock will look for its 3rd straight, and they'll play North Oconee. That is Monday's Class A through 4A matchup. On Tuesday, this is going to be the 5A through 6A. You have defending state champion Lithia Springs. They're going to play Greenbrier. Greenbrier, as we mentioned, is not the defending state champs. Lithia Springs is, but they are the highest scoring team in the playoffs. They put up 40 points in the 2nd round and then 31 in the quarterfinals over McDonough, where a lot of these other scores are 15-7. That team's putting up 40. And then in 7A, it's going to be a rivalry game. Cobb County rivals Pope and Allatoona. Pope got the best of them in the area tournament and regular season, and then they both advanced. I think the big result came in the semifinals. Pope beat Blessed Trinity 7-6. So even though Blessed Trinity is 6A in football, for flag football, they opted to go up to 7A. They were the defending champs, and they lost a 7-6 heartbreaker to Pope. So I think that'll be a good way to close it out. Let's see if we have Coach Holmes. You see him yet? Okay, one sec. So what's interesting about Manchester, they have an outstanding defense, big-time prospects. That was the first thing Rusty said about this matchup. A lot of these teams in the Class A, Division I or Division II, they have big-time guys. Their coaches are trying to vouch for them, calling up college coaches, say, you got to see this guy, you got to see this guy. Well, with Manchester, they have those players, the 4 stars, the big-time prospects, and finally, guys that we've been hearing about, we're going to get to see them on the big stage in a tough matchup. But the other thing is Manchester, I think they've only attempted 16 passes all season. They've not attempted a single pass in the last 2 games. Their 35-13 win over Telfair, 21-17 over Quinch. So obviously Bowdon knows that. They're going to have to match up. Manchester's going to have a lot of moving pieces, and they have played earlier this season. Manchester got the 21-20 victory. In that game, you had, let's see, Quay Cooper, 11 carries, 40 yards. Keelan Whitaker, he brought the big plays. He had 3 carries, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Javon Favors, he also plays quarterback. He had 4 carries, 59 yards. They outrushed Bowdon 339 to 179. And I was looking at it. It's actually the lowest output that Bowdon has had running the ball all season long. So it's the key for Manchester. They got to stop that Bowdon run offense. Kyler McGrin has stepped in at quarterback. He waited his turn last year as the backup. He had 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception in that game. But not being able to control the ball and manage possessions like they normally could threw Bowdon off a little bit, and then Manchester was able to get the victory. And that was a big deal. Opening your season with a win over the defending champs, I think that has motivated Manchester throughout the season. It gave them belief in what they're doing. They've been playing outstanding, and now they're on a collision course to have to beat Bowdon for a second time. So I think that matchup will be really intriguing. The first time they played was a great game, and I think we'll see how far both teams have come since that opener. And that will be on Monday. Let's look at some other games real quick. All right, Cedar Grove and Savannah Christian. The projection are not good if you're a Savannah Christian fan. This is the highest margin I've seen for any of these matchups. I'll have to check the Prince Ave one. But it has Cedar Grove 34, Savannah Christian 7. So if the Raiders are reading this, I think that's got to be a motivating bulletin board level material right there. I mean, this is a team that looked really solid last week, beat a great Carver Columbus team handedly. They're in the finals. They've won a state title before in 2011. They've only had 1 loss this season. Sorry, 2. But yeah, 34-7. Let's see. Cedar Grove can become the 7th school to win 5 GHSA state championships in an 8-year span. They almost did it last year. The Saints advanced to this final with a 49-42 win over the number 1 ranked Calvary Day Cavs, which is Cedar Grove's common opponent with Savannah Christian. Calvary beat Savannah Christian 42-21 in the regular season. If you remember that game, though, it's 21-21 at the half. Savannah Christian went toe-to-toe with Calvary Day until late in the game. So I think that says a lot. I mean, that 21-point win by Calvary over Savannah Christian doesn't quite tell how competitive that game was in that first half. Savannah Christian averages 42.9 points and has scored more than 40 points 10 times this season, including last week's massive 51-26 win over Carver Columbus. Kenry Wall and Zoe Smalls each have more than 1,900 all-purpose yards. Elijah Griffin, the state's top-rated junior prospect, has 31 tackles for losses and 17.5 sacks. He returned an interception for a touchdown against Carver. Savannah Christian is playing in its first final since its 2011 Class A championship. The Raiders are 23-4 in their 2 seasons in 3A after 14 seasons spent in Class A. So this is another game where it's the first ever meeting between the teams. But I think the X factor in this game has got to be E.J. Colson. He's such a winner on the field. It's unbelievable. I thought going into the Calvary Day one, he was going to have to basically win the quarterback battle against Jake Merklinger, one of the best in the state, a 4-year starter, and a guy that really was running an offense that had all the pieces around him. Great tight end, great receivers, great running back, a senior-led team. E.J. Colson was going to have to lead his team, not turn it over, make sure they're converting the tough third downs, making good decisions. He checked every single box. They came out, built the lead, never let it slip away, and he doesn't typically use his legs, but he had to in that game. He came up so big for them, so clutch. So I just think he's the best player in this matchup, despite some of the recruiting rankings. I mean, he's obviously a big-time recruit going to UCF, but I think in terms of just a winner, an MVP, a valuable piece, he's just proven it time and time again to come up with those clutch plays and leadership, and I think that's going to be really exciting. I don't know if it will be 34-7. Hopefully Savannah Christian will score more points than that in that game, but it is tough when you've never gone up against Cedar Grove again or before and get that first taste of what has made the Saints so dominant over the years. So that should be a good one. But let's look again to what I mentioned at the beginning of the show with Stockbridge getting that surprise guest visit from Shaquille O'Neal. I actually haven't read this yet. So their football team, the first from Henry County, got a surprise visit. The basketball legend visited them Wednesday during a celebration of the team's accomplishment. Stockbridge will play Perry Tuesday at the Benz. He came with Henry County Sheriff Reginald Scandrett, who in 2021 named O'Neal the Sheriff's Director of Community Relations. Stockbridge coach Thomas Clark had invited Scandrett, whose son graduated from Stockbridge. He came to speak and had no idea that Shaq would be joining him and speaking with the players. Their coach Thomas Clark at Stockbridge, he played at Stockbridge, and he was a longtime assistant back, I think it was a decade ago. They had multiple quarterfinal runs. They had some tough seasons after that. The program definitely lost its way a little bit, but then he got them back, had the vision, and was the guy they needed to lead it in the right direction. And so I credit Thomas Clark so much. I mean, he went to Stockbridge. He cares about the program. He cares about the kids, and he has done such a good job getting them to this point. And I know that Shaq's visit was very special. So he was just telling us to get our minds right, finish the drill, and don't lose to Perry, Clark said. But not only did he talk to the team, but he mixed with them, played around, and interacted with them really well. He did a team breakdown with them, and he was in the middle of it. Georgia High School Football Daily, with sponsors BSN Sports and Titan Electric, were there to present Stockbridge with its Team of the Week award. That's obviously for beating Benedictine, one of the biggest results of this year's playoffs. Deer Park Water also honored the team as the Team of the Week. O'Neal has been active in his adoptive home of Stockbridge since buying the home in McDonough 7 years ago. In 2021, the Shaq Foundation committed $1 million to the launching of the Shaq Boys and Girls Club of Henry County. So that is awesome. Seeing Shaq getting involved in some Georgia high school football, and that'll be fun. I wonder what he'll say if they end up winning it. Sure, we'll see a congratulatory tweet perhaps. But that will be awesome. I know Shaq's really busy, but maybe he'll tune into that one. All right, so let's look at a couple more. Looks like we haven't heard from Coach Holmes yet. All right, One sec. All right, let's look at 5A. This is the game I have not yet determined who I'm favoring in this matchup, and that's Coffee and Creekside. If I stuck to my normal rules, I'd go with Creekside automatically because I had them number 1 in the pre-playoff poll, and I had Coffee at number 2. So I might end up doing that, but the more I look at Coffee, the more I look at Coach Co. They've got something really special there, and I think the thing that's hanging me up on this is you have a Coffee team that has never won a state title before. I think that is a motivating factor that obviously has been a goal the entire season. It's a goal of a lot of teams, but this is years in the making. And then to get to this point, they've beaten so many tough teams. And the one thing Coach Co was saying on Wednesday, they've done an excellent job at matching up against skilled receivers, guys like Zacoby White, guys like in the Bulls-Florida matchup. Speaking of Florida, that's where Coach Co comes from. He won 5 state titles at Madison in Florida. So if you look at all-time state championships, out of the coaches that are in the finals, he's number 1. No one's won more state titles than him. That's a factor. But the fact that they have done such a good job limiting the big plays, matching up well with the receivers, so they really versatile. They typically run nickel formations. They basically just take that part of the game completely out of the way and force a lot of teams to try to run because they're confident in their run game. But with Creekside, that is possibly the most dangerous offense. Well, it is, in my opinion, the most dangerous offense they've faced this season because they don't have a problem if you want to take away one aspect, going to the running game. They are so deep at those positions. They're so fast. And it looks like Creekside's completely healthy going into this matchup. And I also have been thoroughly impressed with Vincent Berry this season, passing the ball, his decision making. So I think both are true. This is the best offense that Coffee's gone against, and this is the best defense within the state that Creekside's gone against. I didn't get to watch the Mater Day game, but I'm assuming their defense was the real deal because they shut them out. All right, so this is the only championship game this year. That's interesting, between the number 1 and number 2 ranked teams. So that shows how much parity there were in this year's playoffs. A lot of upsets. And the 29th since 1982 that has had a number 1 versus number 2. The number 1 team is 16-11-1 in those matchups. So Coffee is the number 1 in the AJC poll. I have it switched. I have Creekside number 1, Coffee number 2. The Trojans have reached the quarterfinals or better in 7 of the past 8 seasons. The one failure came at the hands of Creekside in 2021 in the first round. In the final game under former coach Robbie Pruitt, Mike Coe, who won 5 state titles at Madison and Florida, took over in 2022. Coffee hangs its hat on defense and ball control. No opponent has scored more than 2 touchdowns, and 5 have been shutouts, 2 in the playoffs. This is another key. Fred Brown, Coffee's running back, 2,300-yard rusher, who's topped 200 yards twice in the playoffs against Jones County and Cartersville, and he has not been held under 100 yards this entire season. Creekside won its lone championship in 2013 and has claimed 5 region titles since. Their only loss came to Mater Day. And Creekside is the more balanced team offensively. You got Roderick McCrary, a 2-way starter. I forgot to mention that. Roderick, 2-way starter, has rushed for 1,959 yards. Vincent Berry has thrown for 2,400 yards. And they have tons of top prospects in this game. Caleb Holmes, Pitt commit, defensive line, Makai Barrow, Florida, and then Kevin Gray, Virginia. And they are predicting 24, Creekside 18. So 24-18 computer prediction. This is what I wanted to look up. Let's see how Creekside, because they've had a lot of playoff runs, how have they done against other South Georgia schools? Because I'm just going to tell you, South Georgia football is different. It just is. And these programs, they come up with a chip on their shoulder. All right, let's see how many. This thing always takes like 20 seconds every time you click something. Hold up. All right, here are the South Georgia teams they've gone up against over the years. This is Creekside. All right, they played Brunswick, first round of the state playoffs in 2010. That was when Johnny White, Douglas County's coach, was still there. They lost that one 48-14, so 0-1. They played Camden County back in the 2008 playoffs, lost that one 49-0. Obviously, this has nothing to do with this year, but it's interesting just to see. The Coffee, they did win that game. That was the 2021 first round, 28-18. So that's 1-2 all time against South Georgia. They are 1-1 against Glenn Academy. They lost in 2014, won in 2006. So that's 2-3. See if there's any more. No, that's it. So they put a lot of Middle Georgia Macon matchups. Obviously, big rivalry with Warner Robins. They've been on a collision course, but they're 2-3 all time against South Georgia. So it's a pretty solid record and a lot of history there to be made. So that's going to be really fun. I'll make my pick on that one next week, but I think it's going to be tremendous, very close, and that's what makes that matchup great. Best offense, best defense, going up head-to-head. Tons of history. But thank you so much for tuning in. I guess we'll try to get a hold of Coach Holmes later on. I know he was busy with the region meeting. But go to scoreatl.com. We'll have all the previews for our games posted right there. We have the latest basketball rankings updated. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. And we'll look forward to coming back on Monday for the state championships.
What you doing?
Hey, just finishing this claim to get Dave back on the road.
Nice. I wonder what Dave's doing.
You do your thing. We've got you covered.
Dang, where you get this car?
You need to join the union.
The union?
Absolutely. You can get 10 of these.
Union construction workers earn the highest wages with the best benefits and the most protection in the construction industry. Find your career in construction. Go to GeorgiaConstructionCareers.com and start your future today.